everyone. I'm the 12th Women's World Chess Champion Alexandra Kostyniuk. I am back with another endgame and we continue discussing endgames where a queen fights against a pawn. Today, it's gonna be tougher for the queen since we're gonna discuss positions with side pawns and with bishop pawns. And why are these positions different from the central pawns and knight pawns? Because even though, for example, in this position, white can force the opponent's king to block its own pawn and play king a1, unfortunately for white, it doesn't give them extra time to bring his king closer to the pawn because it's a stalemate situation. So in order to win against a side pawn, the stronger side king should be close enough to this pawn in order to create a checkmating net. How does it work? So let's see. This king right now is on h5, and there are different rules to know. Actually, there are 3 books that I read a lot and rely a lot, and when I was preparing this course, I was checking these books quite a bit. So the first one is a book by Yuri Averbach that I was growing with, and in that book there is a so-called winning zone that is written and is carefully indicated. Another book is a newer book by Jesus de la Villa, and there he indicates another rule which says that the king of the stronger side should be 2 steps away from one of these 2 squares, g3 and f2. And I think this rule is easier to remember than the winning zone that I just indicated. But anyway, if we count, the king is on h5 and he is 2 steps away from g3. Therefore, this position is a winning position for white. Let's see how. So some checks to bring the queen closer to the king. And then when the queen is placed well enough, we can bring our king to g3. And why this square is so important? Because there is a checkmating threat. And unfortunately for black, even though the material is equal, it's impossible to protect himself from being checkmated, thus the position is lost. So one practical example, this is the position from my game against Harry Kodronavali that was played in the rapid tiebreak of the Women's World Championship 2018. I was playing white, and that's how these positions, a queen versus pawn, often arise. They happen after pawn races, when one pawn is faster than the other pawn. And in this particular case, we see the position where I already have queen. My opponent, unfortunately for her, just played h2, and the pawn is not promoted yet. And we look at the king of the stronger side, and this king is 2 steps away from this f2 square. Thus, we know that the position is a winning one. How to win? I gave a check on b2. King g1 was played in the game. If black plays king g3, then I have a very strong move, queen b7. And if the queen blocks this pawn, it's always good for the stronger side. It's winning always. So my opponent played king g1, and then I played king e3. And that's why it's so crucial and important to have the king close by in order to be able to deliver a checkmate. Black resigned because if she promotes her pawn into a queen, I will give a check on f2, winning the game. Let's carry on and discuss positions with the bishop pawn. These are more complicated because it depends not only on the position of the king of the stronger side, but also, and first of all, in order to evaluate these kind of positions, we need to pay close attention where the king of the weaker side stands. If this king stands closer to the safe corner from the safer side, let's call it safer side, then in order to win, the king of the stronger side should be very, very close. I mean, if the king, for example, stands on c4, it's a draw already. So it's one step from the squares. And again, why is it so important? Because it has to be in time to help the queen to give a checkmate. Queen e7, king b8, and here, very important not to play king b6 because of c8 knight, fork and draw. So it's very important to play king c6. And this one of the most surprising positions that happens sometimes in this kind of endgames. It's white to move, and the queen is not badly placed compared to the queen in the corner, but it's winning for black anyway. There is no way for white to protect himself from being checkmated on one of those two squares. So it's winning for black. But again, if the king is a little bit further away, it's a draw. And if we switch the position and this king is no longer on the safe side, but on the other side from the pawn, then it gives the stronger side more space to win. And here, in order to win, this king of the stronger side should be 2 steps away from one of these two squares. Here it's square g6, so black should be winning. Let's see how. Queen a7 check. If the king goes in front of the pawn, here it gives black time to get closer. If the king goes to e8, then a few checks to improve the position of the queen and then force the white's king to f8. And then we approach the pawn, queen e7, king g8 or king h8. It doesn't really matter here because then king g6, just in time to help the queen checkmate white. Let's see how black wins when the king is quite far away, but still in the winning zone, 2 steps away from this square. It's a winning position, but the winning method is quite different and the checkmating pattern is a little bit different. So first of all, in order to win, black shall not let this king to go to the safer side. So they should deliver a check from a3 in order to not to let white king go to f8. If it goes to f6, as we know, queen always wins. King e8, then quite a complicated series of checks. Again, here, if the king goes to f6, then a very strong check on d4, and then queen g7, and a very nice checkmating pattern, king to c6. Surprisingly, after f8 queen, queen d7 is a checkmate. And that's a checkmate to remember, because otherwise it's quite difficult to find in a practical game if you have no idea about such a pattern. And it is a way to win here if your king is quite far away, but still in time to help the queen. King f8, queen h7, king e8, again king c6, and this beautiful checkmate. That's basically all you need to know about queen versus pawn endgames, but 2 practical examples from grandmaster practice. Here's a game that was played by Zhu Chen, the former women's world chess champion. Actually, I lost to Zhu Chen in 2001 when she became the world champion. She's playing against a strong grandmaster from China, Zhao Xu. It's white to move. The white king is on the safe side, closer to this a8 square. That means that in order to win, if we try to recall this winning zone, it's 1 step away from the squares, b7 and d6. And now the king is quite far. So it's a draw. And in order to make a draw, there is only one move to make a draw. And the correct move is king to a8. That's the main idea to save this kind of position, because after queen takes e7, it's a stalemate. And after queen d7, king b8 follows, and it's a draw. If the king goes to c6, it loses due to queen to e4 check, king d7, queen b7. Now the king is not on the safe side, and that means that this king should be 2 steps away from one of these squares, and just where it's supposed to be in order to win. And in the game, instead of king a8, white played king b8. And unfortunately for white, it's a losing move. because black plays king to c5. And as we know, c8 queen check, promoting a pawn with a check doesn't save the game. It's unfair, I know. King b6 follows, and there is no way to save herself from being checkmated. In the game, white played king a8, but it's too late now. Of course, not king b6 because of c8 knight fork, and it draws, but queen d7. And then after king b8, the game continued with king b6, and black won. So one mistake in this theoretically drawn position and the game is lost. It's very cruel. And one more example, quite a tricky position. Theoretically, it's a drawn position, but there is just one move that saves the game for black. And it's quite difficult to make if you don't know this move. So if you try to recall the winning zone, that this king should be 2 steps away from these squares, g3 and d2, and we see that this king right now is 3 steps away from d2, so this position is a drawn position, but again, there is just one move that saves the game. And in the game, it's a game between 2 grandmasters, Valery Popov and Timur Gareev. Black blundered and played king to e1. Unfortunately, this move loses, because after king e4, surprisingly, f1 queen doesn't save the game again. King to e3, and the position is lost. Queen d2. Checkmate is threatening. If the queen goes somewhere, then queen e2 will come. If the queen goes to c4, then check and checkmate, white wins. In the game, after king e4, black played king e2, but it's too late already, and that's how white won. In order to save the game, black had to play king to f3, the only move, but good enough to save the game. Queen h5 check. If the queen goes to h1, then the king can go to e2. And after queen to g2, king e1 is possible, and f1 will be promoted with a threat to the queen, so it doesn't pose any problems. And in case of queen h5, king g2, and now the king is on the safe side, closer to the corner, and that gives black a possibility after queen e2 to play not king h1 here, because king h1 actually loses due to queen f1, but here after queen e2 the correct way is to play king g1, and again f1 queen will be promoted with a threat to the queen. So it's a draw. I know it sounds complicated,